Hi guys, welcome to the screencast for tomorrow's lesson. What we're going to be looking at now is flexibility. Okay, so this is what we're going to want to achieve by the end of the screencast, be able to define flexibility, describe factors affecting flexibility, describe methods of measuring flexibility, describe flexibility training methods, as well as the adaptations, okay, from these training methods that we may use. First of all, what is flexibility? So flexibility is the range of movement around a joint. So this is what flexibility is. This is the definition of flexibility. It's a range of movement around the joint. Obviously, it's really important for dancers, gymnasts, swimmers. It's also important for all sorts of athletes as it increases the speed and force of muscular contraction, prevents injury, and it helps maximise technique. Okay, so when we're talking about the types of flexibility, we've got two types. We've got static flexibility and dynamic flexibility. On this slide here, we're just going to be talking about actual static flexibility. Okay, so this is the range of movement, not taking into account speed of the movement, e.g. holding a static stretch. So two types of static flexibility. We've got active and passive. Active means the athlete moves muscle into stretch position with no external force is used. Okay, so this picture here is an example of a static active stretch. You as a performer actively stretching into that to make your muscles lengthen. We have passive static, which involves an external force to move muscle into a stretch position. This could be a partner or an external force such as a fence. These pictures are prime examples. So this here is passive static stretching, okay, and then this woman here is using the fence, put her leg up on the fence. Statically, there's no movement there, but it's passive. She's not performing the stretch herself, the fence is helping her do it. So that is static flexibility. The other type of flexibility we have is dynamic, okay, and this is a range of movement taking into account the speed of movement. And the example is a straddle jump done at speed, and here is a picture of an athlete performing a straddle jump, okay. So this is dynamic flexibility. There is movement there whilst taking into account getting that range of movement at the specific joints that we're looking at. So they're the types of flexibility. When we're looking at describing the factors affecting flexibility, these are the four parts that we need to have covered. Okay, so the type of joint, so a ball and socket joint, shoulder, hip, these have greater range of movement than a hinge joint, for example, your knee and your elbow. So the size and shape of joints can aid or limit the range of movement available. So a shoulder joint has quite a shallow surface area with a large humerus head. Okay, so from that we can produce a lot of movement within the shoulder. Okay, you've got to look at gender. So females generally have a greater range of movement than men because of their high estrogen levels. Age, flexibility decreases with age, doesn't everything, as connective tissue hardens and loses elasticity. And then finally, length and elasticity of connective tissue. The greater the length of elasticity of surrounding muscles, tendons and ligaments, the greater range of motion they're going to have. So if you can get notes down on those, please. Right, how do we measure flexibility? We've got two methods of measuring it. First of all is a sit and reach test. I'm sure if you did GCSE PE, you would know about this. So this is a picture of the sit and reach test. This man is sitting down with his legs straight and he's reaching as far as possible onto his sit and reach box. This is the method that you have to perform when you come to a sit and reach test. The advantages are it's easy to set up. Disadvantages, lack of validity as it only measures two areas. Okay, so it doesn't measure flexibility of your calf, for example, at your ankle joint. It measures your hamstring flexibility and your lower back. Goniometry, this here is a goniometer. What this does is, as you can see the figures and the objective actual numbers, this here measures someone's flexibility. Here, they're measuring the flexibility of the hamstring at the hip joint. So you start at neutral, one of the goniometer sides that way, and then the other on the stretched limb, and that will give you an actual measure there. So measures a number of degrees from a neutral starting position to the position at the full end of movement. These are two methods of actually measuring our flexibility. So after measuring flexibility, what we need to look at is types of training. Okay, now it's possible kind of like to improve our flexibility. It's an integral part of any training program. And the benefits are both kind of like health and performance related. There are many training methods all focused on specific joints and planes of music. So obviously stretching exercises can be incorporated into a training session. These are different types of flexibility training we have: static stretching, ballistic stretching, PNF, isometric and dynamic stretching. I realise there's quite a lot of information here, but try and get it all down for me and bring in good clear notes for the lesson tomorrow. First of all, static stretching. With static stretching, as I've just said, you have static active, and static passive. So active is when the performer does it themselves, I've already said. Passive is when it's a partner or a piece of apparatus. Both should be held for about 10 to 30 seconds. Now here are the pros and cons. I want you to mainly focus on the highlighted bits, okay, the bits in bold. So pros are, it is considered to be the safest and simplest method of stretching. So you do this type of stretching with a beginner. Really safe, simple, isn't too complicated, isn't dangerous. It's effective in increasing the range of movement around a joint. Aids muscle relaxation at the end of training. So at the end of training, you would do static active and static passive stretching. Post-exercise, cool down, static exercise. More effective for maintenance of range of movement than improving it. So you'd use it, as I said, after exercise just to kind of decrease the risk of DOMs, but you're not going to do it to improve your flexibility as much. It's most effective for maintaining the flexibility you already have. The cons are slowest method of increasing range of movement, flexibility, fails to prepare muscle for dynamic movements. You shouldn't really do static stretching before an event, okay? It actually decreases subsequent speed and power work. So if you're there just before a netball game and you're static stretching, you're potentially decreasing the power and speed that you can actually perform at. So it's really important that you realise static stretching maintains flexibility, doesn't necessarily improve it, and also it should be done after exercise and not before. I want you just to get the highlighted points down. You don't need to get all down, it'll just take too long. Okay, so the next type of stretching we've got isometric stretching. This involves isometrically contracting the muscle whilst holding a stretched position. So remember, isometric means without movement. So you've got a picture here, woman stretching her calf, actually isometrically contracting her calf there. So there is a contraction taking place, i.e. with no movement. So what you actually do is, with the use of apparatus or a partner, the performer moves their body into a static passive stretch and isometrically contracts the muscle for 7 to 20 seconds and then relaxes for at least 20 seconds, then you repeat it. This is important because it overcomes the stretch reflex, which is what we discussed last week. I will discuss the stretch reflex tomorrow in lesson more detail. Pros, this type of training is fast and effective way. Just all I want you to write is fast and effective to develop increased static passive flexibility. Cons, higher risk of damaging. So all I want you to put is pros, fast and effective, cons, increased risk of injury. That is all you need to put. You don't need to write all of this down. Okay, next method of training is proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, also known as PNF. Now this is a stretching technique aimed to desensitize the stretch reflex to increase the range of movement around the joint. This is the process. We'll go through the process in class tomorrow. Tomorrow, practically, we'll actually do this on each other, okay? So the process is static, with assistance from a partner. The limb is moved just past the point of resistance. Okay, so this is step one. You as a partner are lifting the leg up from the outstretched position on the floor. You are lifting up until this person feels resistance. Then you stop. Then you ask them to hold it there for a certain amount of time, about 10 seconds. Then you contract the agonist muscle isometrically against the resistance for 6 to 10 seconds. Then the person on the floor relaxes, the muscle relaxes, and the limb can be moved further into a stretched position. Muscles are very kind of forgetful, like goldfish, okay? First you stretch it, and it's like, oh, this is the only place I can get to. But then actually, when you have that isometric contraction taking place, and then the muscle relaxes for about 6 to 10 seconds, the muscle can actually stretch further. As I said, we'll do this practically in lesson tomorrow. Positives, you gain flexibility faster. Okay, it's a really quick way to actually improve our flexibility. As you saw or heard about a minute ago, static stretching doesn't kind of increase our flexibility, it just maintains. PNF gains flexibility faster. It aids muscle relaxation, and it's mostly used by performers during a cool down to maintain the range of movement as well. Negatives are requires a partner. Can't always get a partner. You can do it up against a wall, I guess, but mostly requires a partner. Can be uncomfortable for the performer. It is time consuming and complex. Okay, it takes a bit of time. It's a bit complex. If you don't do it properly, it won't have the beneficial effects that you actually want. Ballistic stretching, this type of movement used the momentum of swinging to force the joint through its full range of motion. So bouncing and swinging. So what you're doing in warm-ups where you're actually doing your leg swings, etc. That will be ballistic stretching, improves speed and power. They prepare you for dynamic activities, martial arts hurdling. So hurdlers would use ballistic stretching quite a lot. If you watch the Commonwealth Games, you'd see a lot of the performers warming up doing ballistic stretching. Negative is limited increase in muscle length. You don't get much muscle length increasing. It's mainly for this ballistic dynamic activity you get to increase the speed and power. You have a greater risk of injury, and that's due to the momentum and the extreme range of movement or motion that's going to occur. So when you're swinging your leg really high, potential injuries are muscular strain of your hamstring. So you're kind of creating that. And then this one is a bit of a kind of like an extra point you need to know. So creates muscle tension, does not allow sufficient time for tissues to adapt to that stretch. So because that's a swinging momentum kind of stretch that's taking place, there's not that much time for the tissue to actually adapt to the stretch. Next one, dynamic stretching, that is. So taking a joint through its full range of movement with control over the entry and exit of the stretch. Okay, so these are your dynamic movements before a game. So your high knees, butt kicks, walking lunges, squats. Positives, less risk of an injury as entry and exit is under control. You're controlling this yourself, nice and controlled, steady. Okay, another positive can be performed actively or passively. Improves subsequent speed and power. Now, if you dynamic and ballistic are very similar, aren't they? It's that movement, it's that control, and they're both having very similar positives, i.e. speed and power increases or improves. More appropriate for athletes who are already flexible, obviously because you're taking it through quite a full range of movement whilst actually moving. That's the same as ballistic stretching as well, that is. Dynamic stretching more appropriate for pre-exercise, so during a warm-up. You wouldn't do dynamic stretching post-workout, it's full pre-workout. Does not aid muscle relaxation after training, hence why you would not do it after training, because you don't get muscle relaxation from it. Okay, this dynamic movement, it's used for a warm-up. So adaptations to muscle and connective tissue. Structural adaptations, we get an increased resting length of the tissue, increased elasticity, and a greater range of movement at the joint. These are the structural adaptations that we actually receive from doing these types of training methods we've just gone through. Functional effect, increased range of motion around the joint. So muscle spindles adapt to the increased length, which reduces the stretch reflex stimulus. Now the stretch reflex stimulus we will go through tomorrow, okay, in more detail, just so you have that. Muscle spindles, by the way, just so you're aware, they're sensory receptors within the muscle that detect the stretch, i.e. very similar to like proprioceptors detecting that change in length. So detect the stretch, they relay this information to the brain. Overall benefits on performance and health: increased speed of movement, decreased risk of injury, improved posture or other general improvement in health, or improved performance of motor skill technique, reduced resistance in antagonistic inhibition. So they are the notes I want you to get down for tomorrow's lesson. If you could do so, make some clear and obvious, precise notes, that would be good, and I'll see you in lesson. Thank you. Bye.